Welcome to Virtual Tabletop Gaming Live. We're Keymaster Games, and we're here to tell you a little bit about how to art like parks. Thanks so much to Tabletop Gaming Magazine for inviting us to be a part of this. Let's dive on in. Hey y'all.
Hey.
What's
Hello.
up? We're doing a panel today. We're gonna talk about parks artwork, which everybody loves to talk about.
Yeah.
Love
Yeah.
it.
Love
I like
it.
to look at it more than talk about it.
Well, yes, absolutely.
I like bats in it, but that's just me.
So let's kick it off. We are Keymaster Games. Why don't we introduce ourselves? We'll go around and introduce ourselves. Kyle, why don't you start us off?
Yeah. I'm Kyle Key, founder. Some people call me Keymaster.
We all do.
No one calls him that.
I think Matt's the only one who actually calls me that. He's always like the Keymaster. I'm like, okay.
Only when people realize that your last name is Key and they connect it to Keymaster.
Yeah. Subtle tie in there. Subtle, real subtle.
Maddox, what about you?
My name is Maddox Schuler. I was trying to come up with something like it was just all going wrong. Maddox Master. Nope, that sounds awful. Nope.
I thought you were trying to go Ferris Bueller. Maddox Schuler.
Schuler. I did that a lot. I got Mad Dog when I was born. I was like crazy, like a mad dog, I guess. So the doctor called me Mad Dog, and I've had that nickname. Multiple people have called me that throughout my life. Mad Dog or just Schuler or Shuby.
So when you want a video game with Maddox, now you know how to find him. But what about in Keymaster? What do you do with us?
Art and games. I work with artists, or I'll work on the actual layout design, graphic design. I make fonts on the side also, so I love doing layout and things like that. And then I also work with the mechanics of the games and development, and we all kind of have our hands in that too. But yeah, that's what I do.
Boom. And Matt, what about you?
Okay, so I'm Matt, not to be confused with Maddox.
Yeah.
Two different
no one
people.
ever gets us mixed up.
Nope.
I am Matt, aka the spreadsheet guy. I do finance, operations, and whatever else, including game development with Maddox, or influencing design with Kyle, looking at social media, high-fiving people in customer service.
There's lots there. You do
Give him a grid though, an Excel grid, and he is set for
rows and columns.
So many rows and so many columns.
That's right.
Didn't know my life organized into that. So I am Jennifer. I'm community manager over at Keymaster Games. And that means that I do things like social media, and I reach out to people when they reach out to us. I get to talk to people and like you, maybe, if you've ever reached out to us. And I also do, we are people of many hats. So I, help with some game development stuff too, but that's an all of us kind of thing. Everybody does a little bit of everything over at Keymaster Games.
Love wearing all the hats.
That's right. So this is we are a 4-person team, and we recently made the game Parks. That is our most recent release. It won't, later this year we have some new stuff coming out, but right now it's our most recent release. And it's been really, really cool to see people talk about how much they love the art in parks. So we were asked to tell you about the art in parks and how to art like parks. I think a great place to start is just to talk about why people love the art in parks so much, as it relates to why Keymaster cares so much about art. Maddox, why don't you kick us off? There's something like at the heart of Keymaster that relates to this conversation, right?
For sure. I think that the conversation of parks even started before we were in, like, it happened because of other games we made. And so Can Be Creatures was a game we got to make. That was our second game. We made Control first. All of them have like a focus on art. I love art. Kyle went to school for fine art, right?
Yeah, painting degree.
Degree. Loves to paint, that guy. So we both, me being a type designer, Kyle being an artist like that, kind of came into it being like, we love games. Let's make cool art with fun games. The art will be the hard part, right? And it's like, no way. The art is definitely hard for sure, but also game mechanics are super hard and take a lot of play testing and ups and downs with friends and family that you put them through, and people that you don't know too. So we made some games. Our second game, Campy Creatures, we got to work with a dream artist of mine, Josh Emmerich. He also has a art through 59 Parks, the Lincoln Memorial. It's beautiful. But Josh made Campy Creatures our game. We worked with him. I had a vision for like, hey, I want this mad scientist monster game, B-movie style. He really brought it to life. Well, that game made it into JP Boneyard's hands. JP is the guy who leads up the creative direction around 59 Parks and all the poster series. And so JP played Campy Creatures and was like, dude, the art in this is awesome. And like, we have all this art. What should we, like, we should reach out to them. They worked with Josh. They worked with other artists we love. Like, we should talk to them just to see if they'd want to make a game. We didn't have any clue this was going on. We've always loved 59 stuff. Their stuff has made it into mood boards of ours, even before we knew them. Like some of the stuff for Olympic. I love the vibe that drawing has, or that art has, was in Campy's mood board. I remember it being there. And so when JP reached out, it was like, oh my gosh, this is like this, middle school crush likes me also. I can't believe it sort of vibe to it. And he's like, he wants to make a game. We want to, like, this sounds awesome. And so we have been in love with their art, and that's hitting on the idea of art. And I think JP has done such a great job of just this art forward capture, the emotion, the feel, the national parks. When you go and visit them, it's just an amazing time. It's the wonders of like America, obviously, and just the getting to be in nature and see these different things that just happen, which is crazy. And so that, I think, trying to capture that, JP did such an amazing job. So we were captivated by that art already. And on top of that, just being able to work with them was a dream. And so I think, sorry, I don't know if that was a long-winded answer to your question, but just where we're coming from the art side and hopefully why other people are captivated around the art.
Well, okay, so Maddox, you have art background. Kyle has an art background. Actually, I have an art background as well. So I'm curious, Matt, as it relates to just being an art-forward brand, I'm going to call you out because you're the numbers guy, the numbers and spreadsheet guy. Artists hate numbers and spreadsheets, right? Like, get that out of here. Get away from us. But Keymaster is an art-forward brand. Like, we really care. That's for sure the reason that I was like, hey, I really want to work for this company is because they're making incredible games. So, like, what does that mean to you?
Yeah. No, I think so when I think about Parks and the we'll call the value proposition, right? Why would we make a game with all this art in it? It's expensive to make, tons of illustrations. Why would we do this? And I think about me personally. I want to introduce people to board games. I want to welcome people in to the hobby that I love and have a passion for. And what better way to do that than make people fall in love with the way something looks on the table, or the experience they get, the feeling that they get when engaging with this art. And so we sit down and we go, hey, they've got this beautiful art, 59 Parks. They're like, hey, we've got all these posters. They've got these, people illustrate these posters. When you illustrate a poster, by the way, right? Massive illustration goes on a big old piece of paper. In a game, it goes on a small piece of paper.
Paper, he means 18 by 24 or 36. The poster, yeah.
Not a 2.5 inch card. And so the opportunity to take this wonderful art that belongs on walls and to put it in a box and package it up to sell to people so they can experience the art in a new way is an easy yes. I'm not an artist, but I can see this is beautiful, and I can see that people want to experience this in a new way.
And like you're saying, you're taking something that people are already familiar with and love, the national parks, and presenting something that you hope they love, fun gameplay, alongside it to introduce them more into this world of games, which is where it fits so naturally with us and what we want to try to do with our games.
Yeah.
That's a great call out. I like that idea. I have a question about as it relates to theme versus art that I want to get into, and then I want to talk a little bit about how Parks came to be. So let's start off with, if you are not already familiar with Parks, now that you've heard a little bit about us, Parks is a game about visiting national parks and celebrating the national parks of the U.S. It was designed by Henry Audubon, is designed by Henry Audubon, not was, it still is. And it's
Still with us.
he's still here. And the illustrations are by the 59 Parks print series. So this is something really cool and unique about Parks is that we partnered with 59 Parks, which is a print series. They make posters like you see, some behind me, some behind Kyle, to sell as prints, really nicely produced prints. We partnered with them to license that artwork to put in the game. And that means that there are now, with Nightfall, there's over 40 artists represented in Parks, which is like, that's huge and crazy, and it's beautiful, right? Like there's so many different styles and varieties, but it's also super cohesive and provides great presentation. So do you think, here's this beautiful art, Kyle, I'll throw this at you. Is it the theme that makes people pick up the game, or is it the art?
I think those go hand in hand, actually, because I don't think you can forget that the national parks have a nostalgia, a memory, a family tradition, a sense of adventure even attached to them that people gravitate to outside of board games, right? That's just life in general. And that captures so many different people. So then when you have someone like the art direction of JP directing all these 40 artists into a very similar aesthetic to create such a large collection, um, that on its own creates something that is attractive in a whole new way to art collectors, in a sense of this is a really like a creative collection that is monumental in what was accomplished to create the collection. So to have that living there, and people's wonder and memory and sense of the parks when they see the poster that resonates with them, automatically like they're hooked, and then they realize there's all these other posters and artworks in the same style, and then people start making like lists of parks they want to visit and things they haven't seen and things they would like to go see sometime. And when that translates into the game of parks, then like parks in a way, the game, people are attracted to it because of the national parks and the artwork, and then the game itself provides people, I think, a way to maybe plan that trip and talk about the places they do want to go see, because in a way it's like the whole poster collection in one little box. Like we said, yes, they're massive posters, and I don't know if there's a person out there, there probably is a person out there who has all the posters. I don't know, look, how much wall space would that be, man? That's like a
As a spreadsheet.
18 by 24 times 30, 62. Is that how many?
But let's not do the math. Let's leave that up.
Some of them are multiples, right? There's more than one for like Grand Canyon and stuff.
But the game is providing a one little place for people to view all those cards at once. So in a way, when they see the box and they see parks and explore the national parks, they're thinking about all the national parks. So that's the theme of it that captures it, and the art helps.
Well, and even think about Maddox, the old WPA posters, right? This whole idea of how have people in our consciousness thought about and seen national parks and these visit see America, right? Like all these posters. So there's even this nostalgia there, right?
And the story, right? Yes, exactly. It's like the story that See America told was like, there are all these amazing places out there that you don't even know about yet, or maybe haven't seen in person.
And bringing them into your house, right? Even if you can't go there right away.
Yeah, exactly. And just this like, almost this like plan the adventure of like, man, we're going to put up this picture or put our penny jar up until we get enough pennies to make it to this sweet vacation location, like that's amazing. But just starting with story is where we want to start with all our designs. And I think the story drove, and it obviously helps that the art is so freaking beautiful. But if it was disconnected from that story, it just wouldn't have the appeal that just like certain movies, if the story, it may look beautiful, but if the story doesn't connect as well, it's not going to last.
Maddox, why don't we touched on it before, sort of talking about JP, but I just want to revisit like how this came to be, because the way this idea came about is definitely different than your typical game, right?
Yeah.
When it comes as a publisher. So how did that happen?
Yeah, so games are made in so many different ways. In this case, it's I don't know how many get made this way. I think it's a fun problem to solve, but like all the art's done and you need to figure out the game, right? Is kind of this idea around it. we it, we might have that scenario down the road. We'll see. But again, but just saying like, hey, this art's done, and we know the story around the parks. JP reaches out to us and was like, hey, we want you to, we would love to work with you to make a game. We have all this art. And so on our end, we're like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. It sounds so good. What type of art or game fits this national park art, and how do we feature this art in a way that makes sense and does justice to the art, while also justice to the game? We don't want to just make a game and throw art on top. You know, we want a game that people connect with and care about, and it all needs to work together. And so we tried a lot of different things, and I think some of these ideas may be still up in the air. But first was like, hey, there's a card game. We want to make a game where people can go hiking with them and take cards and be able to play it on as they visit parks and bust it out on a park bench and play it. And so we started pretty small. And ultimately, we also during that time realized we wanted to make playing cards of all the art. And we were like, well, this feels like they're kind of both pretty similar, of like spaces that you would consume. Obviously, there's like the game of a card game with all this beautiful art, but then the playing cards, and that's going to hit a certain audience. And so we didn't feel like we were getting to the right feeling with the card game version where we started with parks. And so we ultimately were like, hey, let's make this a little bit bigger, but because we have these playing cards here. This started with also Henry Audubon, as Jen said. We worked with him on Space Park and worked with Brian Miller on all the art for that, and freaking are so stoked on that game still. But just that that game has like kind of this, I don't know, the baby version of parks, right? There's certain senses of like you're collecting, going to these places, getting resources, turning them in for badges, and these badges are comboing with a system, and then you get to the end. It's a much shorter experience, and there's not this like engine as much that you're building throughout that. It's a rocket. You take off fast and you get there. And so parks, we wanted to have that feeling of like, hey, what does a stroll, a hike feel like? And you're kind of taking in the sights along the way. And so a lot of things were thrown out there of like, we have this starting point of these like places that you're seeing, but how does this combo with the parks and visiting them, and how do we feature them on cards, and how do we feature all this beautiful art that was huge posters, and can we zoom in on different places for different cards to show them off really well, because you're losing a lot, not a lot, I think they still look freaking beautiful on tarot sized cards that we have in there, but just the detail that artists take on like an inch of an illustration, right, that now is down to like a centimeter, that we're able to focus in on those areas. And so we had like kind of these parameters working around of like, we want the art to be bigger because just cards wasn't it for this big type of game. We want there to be tokens and resources that you're collecting and seeing these sites, and then you're using them to visit these park cards. And we knew we wanted them on tarot sized cards. And so we kind of had these guardrails in place and started designing around that. And it was a process for sure of back and forth of multiple designs that just weren't working until we got to a place where we feel like was really starting to be fun.
I want to go back to that first card edition too, Maddox. Like you talked about the guardrails too, but it was unique because when we had all the art existing and we could easily just grab like screenshots of it, knowing that we were going to be able to use it. But even in that simple, I remember in that simple card game edition, which we played at game night, I thought, right? Like it was like a 1 week Maddox sits down and he's like, and this is very Maddox, but he's like, I got this game, printed it out today. Let's play it. And the one thing that carried from that one deck all the way to the final version was the parks art is going to be on tarot cards, because that's as big a card, like and I know you toyed. I remember that 1 week you were like, maybe we can make like really big cards, like really big. But like the one main thing was like, these cards are going to be as big as we can feasibly make them, and it's going to showcase the art. What is the game around that? And that was like the one solid guardrail. I remember from that very first week, it was like,
that's a big guardrail, like, right? They're in proportions. There's an 18 by 24 art that's going to fit onto a tarot sized card. Therefore, we have like an inch of space that we can work with to put icons or things into, which is already like determining certain game design around that. We don't want to put stuff over the art when it's in that setting, you know, and so it was already a big guardrail at least.
Well, and we also just, thinking through the guardrail of, hey, we're going to feature these 48 illustrations, but we have to build a game around other components. We need other components. I mean, people probably don't realize it when they're looking at the card backs, which are just zoomed in, cropped pictures of the illustrations or the trails, right? Like when you stop and look at it, you're like, oh yeah, this is Virgin Islands. Oh yeah, this is Smoky Mountains. But your job is often to say, okay, hey, we got this big guardrail. We can't afford more art. How do we now maximize the experience people have to make it cohesive, right?
Yeah.
To make it feel
and how do we not because the illustrations are so beautiful, and that was even a thing with gear as we crossed that bridge. Maybe I'm jumping too far, but just like the gear is intentionally very simple and not overly illustrative because everything else is so much so that it just felt like the board became so busy, and we wanted to communicate things quickly and simply to the players or whatnot.
Well, yeah. So I want to talk about that. Why don't we just talk about that now, and then we'll circle back on like the other way. Like let's just give people an extreme opposite for like designing campy creatures. We'll circle back on that. So it's not, Parks isn't just that beautiful artwork, right? So it sounds like one of the things is you have this beautiful artwork. It's incredible to look at, but it actually can't be so distracting that you like don't also play the game, that you're not right, like that it just completely detracts from this experience that you're having. So there are a lot of other components in Parks that were illustrated, designed by Maddox and Kyle. How is that kind of creating this ensemble so that you are supporting that artwork, but also supporting the player experience to say, hey, we actually want you to play this game? Kyle, why don't you start?
Yeah, I think Maddox doesn't give himself credit on this very much because people don't call it out, but he just mentioned it. The entire gear deck is illustrated by Maddox, who won't tell you he's an illustrator, but like
not an
all
illustrator.
of a sudden,
I was an illustrator.
I was waiting for the ask there. Like as the design elements come together on like mechanic side, there starts to form a large list of illustration.
Kyle, you're going to be illustrating this, and
like there's like and I just keep track of it. And I knew like gear deck was on my list. Like we're not going to use, I don't know if he was going to use the park stuff again, but we already used it on other stuff. So that, and instead of an ask coming like from Maddox, all of a sudden he's like, yeah, I did this. Did these look okay? And it was like a whole deck of illustrations for the gear. And I was like, yeah, that's fantastic. Like I don't have to do any of that. So yeah, there's a lot of little things in there, that, and as well as all the iconography mixed in there as well, and everything we developed a style there. Max was mainly spearheading it on a simple aesthetic to make sure that it was clean and simple, so that the saturated and very illustrative parts of the park art stood out against all of the extra stuff involved in the game. So is there more on that, Maddox? That
you had to pick 4 resource colors, Maddox.
Well, I'm colorblind. I know. Before with
Keymaster thing.
Learning our lessons here. I got a great app that simulates colorblindness too for other levels of it that we all run through our games now, which is great. So
and there are 3 other people. Now we also have 3 other people.
But yes, picking colors and the symbols of like, hey, what would be fun? Obviously meeple shapes or whatnot, or resource shapes. But the color palette, JP, I got to give all the credit to him of like those the park arts work so well as one of the color palettes that JP kind of helps artists with and pushes them into. And so there are certain blues or greens or, reds that are more like orangey in that palette. And so like there was already a really great palette to pull from, and obviously trees and things that are green or things that are blue like water, but there was already a lot in that palette, and it was like, hey, where's kind of the average of all these things, but also what's a helpful place for color blindness on these on these resource tokens and also on the meeples, because that was another big thing of like, how do we want the meeples to not clash with the resources, but they all need to be able to be seen in a colorblind level. And Kyle did the illustrations on those fun little hiker men and women, and the pairs that you get are different across the board, which is fun. And so I think that, yeah, all that to say, the color to the layout to Kyle making the board for the game, that cool wood, is used in a lot of different places. You would be surprised how many times we use the same thing. Matt's like, we're not using the same thing over again, are we? It's like,
don't give it away, Maddox. Don't give it away.
Maybe that's the secret, is like, how many times can you find out when something's used?
That's the most used piece of art, right, Maddox? The most used is the one wood that I illustrated is used in.
For claims of gold, I'm pretty sure too.
It was actually,
This is not a plug. We're not plugging that game right now.
All that to say, and that's kind of some of what we're learning too. And I think things that we learned in Space Park, we're able to implement in Parks. Things that we learned in Claims of Gold, we're able to put into Parks. Things that we learned in Campy Creatures, and we're doing that hopefully every time, so that we're more and more able to hit exactly what the people who are following Keymaster are looking for, and surprise them in some fun ways where they're not used to.
So Matt, I wanna throw this question to you to start. It's about that extreme opposite, that Parks is really like, one, is that the right thing? Should you be starting with art first? Is this really how we should be designing games all the time? Or is it important to start with the game's mechanics first and then build in what you need afterwards? How do those experiences really differ, even from what we're doing right now? Because we're not doing necessarily an art first right now.
Yeah, I mean, again, it's almost that it's not about art first or mechanics first or game first, right? It's about product first, right? So that's what we talk about a lot internally, is what is this product? This experience of buying, opening, punching out all the chipboard, opening up the rule book, setting it up for the first time, learning it, teaching it, experiencing it, and putting it away. What is it that is going to make this game, this product, this thing special? And so when with Parks, we knew, right? With Parks, we knew that there was this these illustrations and this beauty and this aesthetic that we needed to bring to the forefront of the product experience. That's why the boxes got the art on it. You pop it open, you're looking at all this beautiful art on the punch board. You pull it out, you've got these wonderful trays and these log trays that you pull it out and put on the table. You see the resources organized in there. The whole thing looks clean. The whole thing looks like this natural aesthetic. And so with Parks, yeah, naturally we had this like art, like we talked about. We're building an entire product around the art, and then you have something like Control, for example, one of our older games, Control. Hey, we've got this great illustration on these cards, but really, what is this game about? Well, hey, we wanted a small game you can put in your pocket and play on the go in 5 minutes. So that was the idea. That was the parameter of the product that we're putting together. And if it's only 5 minutes, then it needs to be a smaller game. It needs to be a more affordable price point. And that's where you land at having the small tuck box or two-piece box that we open up. Or even further, something like Campy Creatures, where you're trying to say, hey, well, what is it that we're trying to bring to people? Well, it's this idea of B-flick horror monsters, this kind of fun, engaging, laughable vibe where it's like, oh, the mortals, the teenagers, the engineers, the hunter, and all these fun creatures. So you bring in all these, that's the forefront of the product. But also for Campy Creatures, for example, we wanted this game that's about laughing and being loud and having these moments of big boisterous, like, no, why'd you play the mummy? This was not the right time for the mummy. So you've got this idea of the product and pulling it together. And then last, I think one of the things that people talk about with Keymaster a lot is our bits, the wood tokens, the metal coins. If you go get metal coins, the tray, the insert, the box. We print on the inside of all of our box tops. We have an illustration in all of those. And so, hey, what is it? What are these extra things that we're bringing that support that core value of the product? In Parks, it's 12 wildlife meeples. You got, we just could do one bear-shaped resource, or we could do 12. Well, honestly, a couple extra cents, well, more than a couple extra cents of money to make 12
some
little
extra cents.
And
a
it
couple
makes
extra cents.
Kickstarter that we got there, right?
Sure,
It was like
for
we
sure.
started that, like, and that's a core philosophy or something we're figuring out of like, why does this thing need to exist, and how do we get it into people's hands really at the right price, you know?
Right.
And so
That decision, specifically with the wildlife in parks, was for sure the right one. Right, on social media, like the amount of people who make little dioramas with the resource tokens is so fantastic. It's one of our favorite things to see. We love when that happens. It's its own kind of little game, and that's totally okay. It's a little, like then they're doing that, not playing the game, kind of circling back to what we were talking about before, how we make playing the game.
Our overall goal is like getting people to connect over games is like, yes, we want people to fall in love with great games, but it's really you're having these amazing experiences together, and it's fine.
And realizing that other people are having the same amount of fun as you doing the same thing. Matt, so you brought up product, and I think this is a great time to talk about. So if we were in person, right? Like if we were talking to people in person, we were at a convention, if this was a real convention, not virtual, one day soon, right? We inevitably get some portion of people walking up to us who walk up to us specifically for the aesthetic. They see a box art. They've never heard of Keymaster before, and they walk up to us just because they're like, your artwork is incredible, want to hear more. And they just buy it. They'll listen to us for a little bit, but they were sold when they walked up to us, right? They knew they wanted to buy it just because they love the way it looks, which is awesome. So for us, Kyle, I'll ask you this: what's a win for you on the back end of that? Like,
I think a win is something that we've stressed internally from the beginning, with Control as well, all the way up to Parks and beyond. Is that that experience at a convention is exactly what we want to happen for anyone experiencing our games at first. We want the art of the game, and this stems from Maddox having an art background, myself having an art background as well. We want the art of the game to be as important as a part of the game, as important a part of the game as the mechanics of the game. So the win for us is the game on the table at a convention, the game on your shelf in your home attracts someone's attention to say, what is that? Tell me more about that. And then the gameplay inside of it is the care taken there, from the components to the gameplay, everything inside the box, invites them to share it with friends and experience it with others, as well as allows the game to stay on your shelf, or in a convention setting, like it allows them to be like, you know what, I'm going to buy that because that will fit in my library, and with my friends who I play with, they'll want to experience that. But it's hand in hand, making sure that we pay as much attention to the art and same time as much attention to the mechanics that go inside the game, which Maddox like joked earlier, like we thought, yeah, art, that'll be easy, and then we'll figure out the mechanics of whatever that. And then we were like, mechanics are super hard to figure out and give that much attention to make sure it feels that good. So,
and with that too, I feel like it's like trailers for movies, right? We all just watched the Dune trailer, and like the feelings of that trailer are off the charts. I feel like almost like a kid, like obviously it's a serious movie, but like what it's presenting to me feels like, this feels like movies, right? I'm going to see something I've never seen or experienced before, and it's just so exciting. And I think I want our art, or what the story that we're telling. Obviously, I think the movie's going to be amazing, but certain movies have amazing trailers, and then they don't pay off when you see them. You're like, the trailer was better than the movie. Come on here. We want our games to be like to have that sort of trailer effect, and then you come in and you play it, and you're like, oh, I need more. I want to play again and again. Is at least the goal that we kind of strive for as we think about art with our games.
The trailer analogy is perfect too, because one of the big challenges we face is making sure the gameplay complexity and approachability matches the approachability and accessibility of the art. Mm-hmm. Right? I mean, so I was thinking about, I watched one movie, I don't know, 8 or 9 years ago that I thought was an action movie. I saw the trailer for it. I thought it was an action movie, and I came in excited, adrenaline pumped. Turns out it was like more of a suspense horror movie with a little bit of action in it, and I was not ready for it. Say what?
You're talking about that.
Sunshine? Is that what you're talking about? What are you talking
No,
about?
but it was a Liam Neeson movie about crashing in the Arctic Circle with the wolves.
The Gray?
The Gray.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Y'all, I left the theater because I just wasn't ready for it. People do that in board games.
They will. They'll stop. They will opt out right in the middle.
Yeah. They'd be like, whoa, this is not what I expected. And that is a huge challenge when you have inviting, approachable art. What if we made this super thinky brain game and we didn't, and then people are like, wait, I thought I was going to just be hiking some trails and chatting with my friends.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And it turns out that like that payoff, thinking about what that experience was going to be, is very rewarding for people when they sit down to play, because there is this like, this is a relaxing. I do have time to think about what I'm doing. I do have time to appreciate the artwork that we're presenting from the 59 Parks Print series. I do have time to make animal dioramas and to make the mistake of buying too much or trading for too much wildlife tokens so that I can improve on my diorama.
Never a mistake.
We've all done it. We've all been there.
If you're playing Nightfall, you might be wanting to do that. You know, you might have a year card that gives you extra points for diorama wildlife.
For dioramas, right? You have to take a picture every time you.
Are you saying we should make like a picturama, like picturegram? What are those called? Like if you can complete this picture at the end of the game, it's like extra bonus points. It's like moose in between two trees.
Capturing those memories, is that what we're trying to do here? Okay, so let's shift to some like bigger picture, kind of like round out this idea. So we make beautiful games, and I just want to circle back on to like a higher level of like, we know that the artwork in our games is great. What does that mean? What does having beautiful art mean to us? Like, how do we identify that? Like, if somebody wanted to make a game and they're like, we want to art like Parks, we want to art like Keymaster Games, how do you do that? How do you know?
I feel like beauty is different for lots of people too, for sure. We make games that we care about, that we think are beautiful, for sure. Some people might be like, the art's fine, you know? And I feel like beauty in a sense too, of like, what I think you got to do things that you care about and matter to you, whether it's the mechanics and how they feel special to you. And you're like, I am excited about this right now. Or the art, and you're like, I drew this thing and I'm super excited about it. Or you're making this thing and you're so connected with it and you're excited about it because of whatever feelings it's arising in you. I think is the biggest thing of like, art is that vehicle, right? You see something and then it's eliciting a response inside of you, whether that's nostalgia and a time where I went to this park and I saw this thing and it brought me back to this moment and I love that. Or, hey, I want to go to this place and there's this longing of hope when I see this thing. Or this longing of terror when I see this creature and I'm like, I gotta avoid this thing. Like these are all feelings. And I think that's our barometer, I guess, of like, how are these feelings coming across in our games? In what ways are they striking a chord with us? And we hope by them striking a chord with us that they're going to strike a chord with lots of other people, in the way that the feelings and the beauty hopefully are coming across in that way.
Anything to add to anybody else?
Great answer, Max. Yeah, I think he said it. It's like, it's that feeling you get inside nowadays is like, man, I gotta copy this link and I gotta send this to somebody else. Like when you see something or you watch a trailer or it's in many different forms. When it comes to artwork like that, in a game production, it's like, it's important to us to make sure we find things that do that for all of us. And then our feeling inside of sharing and passion for that unique aesthetic, whatever it may be on an art side, is what carries over into the product. And then like, as Maddox said, some people will be like, yeah, it's all right, but then in general, like, I think most people are also you're going to find the people that also resonate that same aesthetic with you. So that's what's going to bounce back and forth from a win of the product.
I wonder too. So this is the non-art guy, right?
Yeah.
a lot of my feelings about illustrations has to do with familiarity, and by that I mean like you hop on Twitter, Instagram, scroll through. I get a lot of art that pops up in my recommendations in like the search feature of Instagram, and so
Instagram
many. That's right. Evidently, because I'm doing research, looking at art all day. So many of the things that really strike me as engaging and like are things that are familiar. Like someone does a sketch of Black Panther, right? Sadly not with us anymore. People are now representing what
kind of rep.
Yeah, what that meant, and all these illustrations. And you're like, oh, okay, this is just an illustration of something I've seen in real life, but the way it captures that familiarity and inspires me to remember and recall. I think that idea of remembering and recalling is something you see in a lot of our games, right? We're calling back to. This is what mood boards do, I think. Again, not the art guy here. They make you feel or recall or recount something that feels good to you, that feels nostalgic or feels inspiring in a different way or a different perspective, right? And so that's like with parks, obviously the See America posters, those travel posters, even like Visit Miami. It's like, okay, this feels familiar, and it feels familiar to something that's calling me to the national park, something that I also already care about. Campy creatures. It feels familiar to these horror monsters, executed really well, right? Maddox, you talk about all the time what makes great art. Well, or how do you make great art? Hire great talent, right?
Yeah,
and identifying the talent is that piece.
And what you're talking about too is like almost the technique of something. You're right. If Chadwick, I saw that one on Twitter where like the dude paints him upside down and then turns around and you're like, oh my gosh. Yeah. But even the emotion conveyed through the technique used is like, dude, this just hits it, And so looking at all the different techniques used across 59 parks, there's so many different things. And this is maybe for the artist. It's like, you can also be really good at technique, but miss the forest for the trees. That's a bad pun, right? Not no pun intended, but just that like, hey, you could be really good at something, but miss the emotion that you need to capture. I see this all the time. That's the struggle. Like once these learning part of things become easier to come by technique wise, but it's all to getting to the message. But then you also have the person who's like, man, I look at certain things and I'm like, this thing's amazing. Then I try to make that thing and I'm like, oh, this is great, great, great. And then like 2 days later, I'm like, this is awful and not even close to what my taste is, And there's a skill gap in the artist's taste that they're growing towards or whatnot. And it's learning those techniques. But like emotion and vibe is always going to trump technique. Like you got to have the feeling come out first and then you can get good at the other stuff,
Right. Well, how are we, because art is for different people. I think that's a great call out. We are four people. We do have largely similar tastes when it comes to seeing things, not for specific aesthetic. It's not like we're focused on super line heavy artists versus more painterly artists or something like that. I don't mean like that, but like just in that recognizing that feeling, that vibe. How do we work as a publisher to make sure that we are representing, like diversifying our art, still equally great, but keeping it diverse because art is going to speak to a lot of different people?
I think that goes back to kind of touching on the two different approaches of game making. When you have a situation with parks where it's all art first and you have that puzzle piece out front. And then you have situations where you're developing a game the opposite, where you have full mechanics in place and you are working with a general theme that is touching on the mechanics, but maybe the actual card art or the art style doesn't exist yet. And so that's your like open door to look at styles that maybe you wouldn't consider before, or you start searching for that spark of inspiration and sharing and memory that speaks to you, but maybe is in a different style than you would have thought before. But it is an open door for you to like explore different stuff. I think maybe Control is like a really great example, our first game, even because Maddox coming up with the design for that, it was locked in. Like it was just a game. We had like little symbols on it, and we ended up doing that all in house. And Maddox had me do the illustrations, but in a sense, it was like how I remember working with Maddox. We're like, okay, so we need how many illustrations? Okay, how do we illustrate antimatter?
How many times can I draw this sci-fi object and make things look different?
Right. Sure, I'm not sure what dark matter is, or like a deflector. Like, what is the, like these abstract concepts? And so
It's like,
landing on
Cerebro, Kyle, like cool Cerebro.
yeah, with it, I remember that process. Like, we had a mood board. We went, like vintage sci-fi. But remember, Matt, it took me like, I think there was like 3 revisions when in that same process Maddox briefly touched on. It was like we like did some illustrations and Maddox was like, you need to do that one again. And I was like, what? What are you talking? We remember that. But it was like, oh no, we need to land in this whole other ball field of like aesthetic. And then once we together like developed a language there, it was like, I don't think I would have made that art on my own, like that style. It's not something I would have sat down and like just done, but it's definitely like we both directed it into a realm that was like brand new. And that was because we had the mechanics in place, created this open door for creating the emotion that we wanted. And even today, like Jen, I know you feel some emails and stuff from people. It's not so much more as when we first launched Control, but like some people see that as like love the steampunk aspect of this. Like some people read it as pure sci-fi. They're like, yo, love this pure sci-fi, time and time machine. And then you get the occasional like this steampunk vibe is awesome, and they're like, I love this. And then there's a few people that are like the Gallifreyan Doctor Who. Like
right.
I'll admit I've tried to watch Doctor Who. I've not watched it. So those emails come in, they're like, yo, you're like right on top of the Gallifreyan. I'm like, I
totally wasn't.
Intentional.
Right. And that's because that abstract, it is an abstract style. So it speaks to many different people in many different ways.
Kyle's kind of hitting on the process of art in general, of just like with our games, we talked about Caper being like Wes Anderson meets Pixar, right? And I was like, we don't feel like we've seen that in games today. That would be so fun to execute. Josh, doing that so well and working with us to come up with that was awesome. And then Kyle with Control was like my starting point. I was reading a lot of Ray Bradbury back then, and his book covers were just like super simple. I'm like, dude, look at this. This is awesome. But like, it's the combination of a bunch of different styles and influences. But like Matt was saying with the mood boards, but it's like you're coming together to make something new. And I didn't have that in mind as like Control landed. It was like, man, Kyle's landed this in such a cool place, And so I feel like it's this mixture of all these things that come together to hopefully make something new. And that's what we try to do with not just the art in our games, but the mechanics in our games and all that of like, how can we give these new experiences where there's something eliciting a feeling and that sort of stuff. So, yeah.
So last question. It's a big one, maybe super loaded, but and I'll throw this to you, Matt, to start. Is Parks repeatable?
Repeatable.
Can we deliver? Can we Keymaster?
Whatever this phenomena is that makes Parks work in the great way that it does, is it repeatable? Can we do it again?
Again, Parks is so special, not just because of the amazing art 59 Parks pulled together, or because the actual game just lines up with this feeling that we want people to experience of going on a hike with your friends, experiencing the national parks with your friends. It's also special because the U.S. national parks right now are really experiencing a resurgence of popularity, of interest, for environmental reasons, for generational reasons. I think we've all talked about. I've taken multiple cross-country trips, and as my kids get to these, they're 7 and 6 and 1 right now. But as they continue to get older, those cross-country trips become more and more of a goal for me. And what do I want to do? I want to drive cross-country. I want to see the national park. So I think on the one hand, parks will be special for us and our brand, and really have a special place in the market for a while. But it's not the only thing people are passionate about. It's not the only piece of common ground that these non-board gaming people are willing to experience a board game in. So yes, absolutely, this is repeatable, but it's going to take a lot of work and a little bit of luck.
The work the work involved is the one key thing I'll expound on, Matt. Like, yes, Parks, as a game like Parks, and the art involved is repeatable. Where Parks is unique is that all of the work involved in 59 Parks print series was already done. So Parks being repeatable itself is a unique situation because of the timeline that we created it in terms of from initial concept of let's make a game to having a final product. That short, very short timeline that happened is a unique situation because all of the years, I mean, correct me, Max, if not, like 59 Parks print series is a years long project. So that passion and stuff existed. Now,
and it wasn't done. That was why that was a good, again, guide rail. But like we had 48 illustrations that were like, cool, we can fit this into the game with where they're at. But they needed another year to complete the rest of them. And so I know that's a bummer that we couldn't get all of them in the base game, but that's where that was coming from too, was like, that takes a while to make these things and they're so freaking awesome. And we didn't want to over inundate it with cards if the game didn't need that. Like, yeah.
No one wanted to shuffle 72 tarot-sized cards together.
All the Nightfall people do.
Well, they will, and they'll figure out how to do it.
But your deck, you can do lots of things, but yes.
There'll be technique videos that pop up. Best way to shuffle the part cards.
Let's write that down. Yeah.
Content, write it down.
But luckily they're linen finish, ivory core, so when you shuffle them,
they'll be fine. We'll be good to go. Any final thoughts, guys?
Well, I didn't get the answer.
Well, then go ahead.
I would say absolutely repeatable. But I'm the worst sense of like knowing, like every single one of our games, I felt the same way. I'm like, Control, this is the next best thing. Camping Creatures, this is the next best thing. This thing, Space Park, Claims of Gold, all the things. I'm like, I felt the same way that I felt when I was putting out Parks, that I felt putting out all these other games. I'm super stoked on what we're making, and I think that's what I want to keep doing, is making things that make me excited like that. And the success of it after the fact, I hope one of our other games raises to that. Oh gosh, I hope so. That'd be awesome. And that we make something that has that same sort of feel. But yeah, in the sense of like what we're making, I feel like definitely, and I'm really excited about some things that we'll share in the future.
And that's kind of just where we're working towards from now on, right? Like that's the new benchmark for us to try to beat, exceed something.
Yeah.
Something.
Yeah. That's the goal.
Hey, I think it's great. Hey, thanks so much for sitting down and talking about art today. This has been a lot of fun.
Good times.
Yeah, it's been a blast.
Thanks for taking us on this journey.
That's right. We just went on a little hike, a little meander.
By Jen.
All right. Well, everybody, thanks for hopping on with us. We really enjoyed talking about this. If you have any questions, drop them wherever this video is, and we'll be there. But in the meantime, enjoy the art in Parks, and enjoy art in games. Think about it. Take a game off the shelf that you haven't before, and maybe we hope that this makes you look at it in a new way. Think about it in a different way. Think about a little bit more about how it was made, or maybe the reason that you enjoy it as much as you do. And in the meantime, this has been Keymaster Games. We're signing off now. Thank you so much.
Thank you all.